Okay, good morning. So yesterday we were talking about the situation where we have two books on a table.
Ta kesa hanzo nedan dende jigala chudu chungres di khari yerso na thebni che thebni di khari gan yor lo na chokse chi thol yores.
And together we all thought about book 1.
Ta kesa hanzo khari thola chudur chor lo na theb thangbo di gan che res.
Just the top book.
Gang la teng la yusto di theb di gan.
And we drew a force diagram for this book.
An theb thangbo di gi thana zo shugi rimu jyo di rimu di tires.
We all identified that there was a force of gravity on the book.
Ta ngazo shu khari khari te yor lo na dinang la tenshu thana theb di gan tenshu jyo chi te res.
By the earth.
Tenshu thi di khari cha yor lo na sai khola di che.
And there was a force on book 1 in the opposite direction and equal in strength from book 2.
Ta shuk shemba shne res di shuk se khajo yor lo na thangbo di da chikpa che thana shi khajo ta na dokcho res di ani thanda shuk di thepni be gi thep thangbo gal shuk ge di res.
You notice we only concerned ourselves with the forces on book 1.
Ine kesa nganzo thanda thunang che zo di khari gal te yor lo na thep thangbo di gal shuk khajo ge me jora di shuk ge di kon thunang che res.
And although we needed to think about this situation, the only thing we needed to draw was book 1.
Ta nedang themba na khari shagu gur la na nedang tharang che ine nganzo rimu gal ma ko du gal thep thangbo rang gal shuk khari ge me di nganzo rimu ga ma pa res.
And the forces acting on book 1.
Thep thangbo gal shuk khari ge me jora di zo ma te res.
So we noticed that this pairing of forces occurred again.
Dila du gal yang nganzo shuk la ta oi na ya chaji chagi doas dila yang.
One way to think about this is to imagine if this was not the case, if forces did not come in pairs, what would the universe be like?
Ta kiranzo samlo na dinde ji shawai na sa kisi nganzo shuk di chana nigi yorelan kishi gora chala nigi yorelan kisi chala nigi me oi na an jigding kham di khande doji kiranzo samsu no khande doji yoro sambu dos.
Because if I have a force down on the ground and the ground does not have a force back up on me, what would happen?
Ta tanda shuk chala nigi yorla du gala namju khare shigod la na price khorangi ma shuk khazu ma gya nang shi sai sul shuk ge yores la roas ta kisi chala me oi na ngi ma shuk ge yores phajo di shuk ge me nan khare chung res. You'll slip into the ground.
I might fall asleep in one place on the earth and wake up somewhere completely different.
Ta del ne chig la nye chara ne bet shimba jila yo jala ta du gola shimba jille di jodinde chasi roas.
So we can also see it's very problematic if we do not have these pairing of forces.
Dila du gola thanda shuk la di chala ni me oi na kange mangbu shuj thik res de.
And this type of analysis and the skills we're building up lets you understand many different systems on our planet and also in our universe.
Dila du thanda nganzo ne de mangbu ji shi doas di she di thanda jiden kham na la mala lega mangbu shi gi ora di da jo cha de rest.
You can think of, for example, if this is a lake. And there's nice trees along the lake.
Ta cha sha na di jingchu jimba che en di tha de la ni shingdong chi shing de yores.
There's the force of gravity acting down on the lake.
Ta thanda chu di gala thanda hanzu gi thanda tenshu jora di gya de yores.
And there's the force of the earth pushing back up on the lake.
Ta na shi sai kola gi pha ya shu ji ge yoras bi yores.
No, I don't mean the earth as the whole earth, but just the bottom of the lake floor pushing up.
So bottom of the lake floor. Ta thanda hanzu chu thu do sa the de sa gi thanda ne jora khu jora di ani ya bi de yores.
And if this is our earth, and over here is our moon,
Ta di sai kola im bacha shas di chunga di hanzu dawa di.
there's also a pair of forces acting here.
Thanda del acha shan del ta oi nage tanda shuk chaji gwe jora di tanda lega chedi restem.
The earth is pulling on the moon, and the moon is pulling on the earth.
Tanda shuk dodan di tharan do de res se kolagi dawa di thengi res thana shi dawa di se kola thengi res.
So we can understand very small systems to systems very large, including the whole universe.
Di la dunne de de ro cha shawaina mala chunju ni ya chimbu chesa tanda ngzu jigden khamba de ma khidron de ya ma ta res.
So the same type of analysis we're doing with the book, with the big box, these are the skills that you can apply to understanding many, many systems.
Diladu mala ta minda ngzu gi shedo chue kodo chue chedu tanda pezun chunju tanda tab ni imbai na re ya shogam chimbu de peju sha de pezun shawa na re dindu thangma pezun sha ne seu su res.
But let's get back to book 2.
Ta rangja ngzu tab ni ba gal dre yes ya.
Can you, each of you, on a whiteboard, can you draw a force diagram for book 2?
Ta tanda duga susu la kabang re yo ra ding na la khiran zu gi tab ni ba gal shu khaju gya me je ra shu khari khari gya me di rimodi ma ko ro chis. Tidu ro as thame.
I want to share the same hint I gave yesterday.
Kesa rimu matingo la gela gita daduen doji chikshe sa di rangja ma she is di doji.
You only need to draw book 2. That's the only object you need to draw.
Ta dadi khari in lawai na tanda so thunang chi sa khari cha derla na tanda shu girmu thigro thep ni ba gal shu khari gya me di chi puthi res.
You don't need to draw book 1 or the table or the floor or the walls or the science center.
Thep thangbo gal shu khaju gya me da chokje di gal khaju gya me da chikba di la khaju gya me da cheri tene gal khaju gya me dizu thibu bu yo mares. Thep ni ba gal khari gya me di chi puthi res.
Just book 2.
Thep ni ba di chi bu gal shu khaju gya khari gya me jora di chi puthi res.
You can draw at the same time.
So, you are book 2,
Kira thep ni ba indas.
okay? This is the table.
Di chokje ba chashas.
The table pushes up on you
Chokje di kiran la du res.
with a force that is equal to your gravitational force.
Di lo du khagas du la na shu se jora. Anda ten shu jora di kiran khagas me ma odi shuk di garan gi ma du res koran chu.
Do you agree?
Dil mi tu US.
Now, I'm book 1 that comes on top of you.
Ta kiran di la nga thep thangbo di res. Thep ni ba ga thangbo di le res ta.
What happened to the force by the table?
Ta chokje ga la ta chokje gi shuk jora ga.
Did it become bigger or did it stay the same?
Rangja di re khalis pyo du re khares. Chokje di la khari khaba du res. So you are asking the force pushed by this table?
This is the table. So without book 1, the table pushes up with a force equal to his weight.
Ta thep thangbo mebe kapsu kira thep niba ra niba chiku indu kala kirang gi jize khajo yo gi ta shuk jora din nang she chokje di kirang du yo ro was
Yes? Now, book 1 comes on top.
ta thep thangbo thep nibe ga le res
What happened to the force by the table?
ta chokje ga le shuk jora di khari kheba du res khari chu res kheba du re there is the change.
There's a change. So, without this is equal to that.
Kisi thep thangbo me bai na di khagas yo nang shi ti chibali ro as ya shuk de
But now you put the book, and this becomes bigger.
ta di gala thep thangbo thep niba ra niba di sha ra niba di sha du di shuk de ge cheru du ro as
So the table knows that book 1 is there.
cheza chokje gi ha bu yo res thep thangbo di yo
Because the table now pushes harder than it was pushing before.
khais na khandis ha bu la na bia bue jora ni ne dang thangbo de ndu go du bue di len tha ta ne dang ni ba yo jora di bue di shuk cheru res
But book 1 and the table do not exert any forces on each other.
이나야 탭 당보다 쪽제 코라니 발라 아니 슉 야마드나 개주르디 개기요 마데스
지치린 사라
지지게
지치디 딥동 지치디 니바건 레차리 식디요 마르시고라.
So does it mean that the book 2 feels the weight of book 1 but there's no force?
Book 2 feels this force from book 1.
그 탭 니버 주라 탭 당보 캐나 니버 말해 죽다 디탭 강로 유디기 슉디 sorgu res
And this force is the force on book 2 by book 1.
그 디가노 슉 질레죠 주라 디 탭 당 by book 2 on book 1 right 탭 니베기 탭 당보 간레 레죠 res
No. The force on book 2 by book 1.
탭 니베 간레 탭 당보 슉 게죠 주라 디 층기 res 탄다 따디
This is the third law, force pair of this.
디 주라 탄다 가주 차차 샤유 아슈라 디기 차디 야지 겨라 디가지 야디 파기디 차디 res
This is equal to that.
디니 치파 차유 res 슈피 슈세 주라 차 res 디니
So that force is equal to this force.
탄다 델 슈 주다 디기 슈세 파기 탄다 워시 다 오마디 온데 다 치파 res
And the force by the table then is equal to the weight of the lower book plus the weight of the upper book.
딜라 두다 판디니 슈 게죠 주라 디 카리 차기 라와이나 탭 오마디다 강마니가 이지세 동구라 디니가 차기 res 슈디 원 이야 게죠
근데스 저래. 이게 야식 잡니 코니기 바로 식체되다. 디니기 바로 식체되니 찍버세.
간데스 울티워디 저거다기나
코니기 바로 식체 지어라. 그들의 빠지 딥동 동부 파니 니바기 야잡 식체되다. 니바기 조치라 잡잡 식동 조치 야잡 식되니가 다디니가 식지거라. 디니가 돈기 니가 찍으세요 그래.
So his question is like the push or the force like the force exerted by book 1 on book 2 is equal to force exerted by book 2 on book 1. Likewise, the force exerted by book 2 on the table is equal to the force exerted by table on book 2.
Yes.
So, ani detail khare thangbo da niwa che niwa da chokse So does it mean that all these forces sum up to 0? When you sum up all these forces, does it become 0 or what do you mean?
So the sum of these three forces
Tanda
sum up
kyundum
to
tanda
0.
se jura tanda she dikharna na disum do shu disum dom bainas an la por chhes
But of course, because all these forces are exerted on the same book.
khai zona tanda di shu ke she do shu khari gan ke shu lana shu gyasa chipa thep ni ba diga cha de res
And they sum up to 0 not because of Newton's third law,
tanda le por chagi re la jura dom ne tanda man so newton ke tenjum sumba la jua digi mares
but because this is not moving.
khai zona thep di yu gu chigi yo mares
디디 니바기 마지 디 니바기 살아보기 시작하죠. 내가 독식 찍어라. 이 독식 때 사기 찍어요. 사기 편식 찍어요를 신식 찍어.
So this book too pushes like exerts a force on the call a bigger sala on the sala say kola lagi sala. So it pushes on the earth's gravity. Likewise, there is something which pushes it back. So what is that object?
So
Book 2 on the ground. There is some push exerted
on the ground or on the earth?
No, the shala di lagi say kola lagi say kola on the earth,
on the planet.
on the planet itself.
It is this force. So the earth is pulling down on this book with this force,
Say kola gi thanda thingi ras themni digala.
and this book pulls up on the earth. with a force that is equal to that.
Tana shi sai kula gi ma thingi ora. Theona shi thep digi sai kula gi shu se thara gi ya thingi ores.
야 탱겨.
Ya thingi ores kurangi thep ni badi.
사 골에 데라 거기 냉겨요라. dimnibandige 사 골에라 파 냉겨요.
So it pushes on the earth's gravity as well, right? So the book 2, his question is.
So there are two interactions with the earth.
The say kolanyam do the dewa chidan jora ni ores.
One is the gravitational interaction.
Chik di pensu dewa chaya jora karir lana say tenshu jora kole tenshu di chaya ores.
And the other one is the touching interaction.
Chik di karir lana dewa pensu dewa chaya di regni tu me chaya shwa.
So if the table pushes it up this way, then this pushes on the table with a force that is equal to that.
The regni kapsu chokse digi pa bigu yora. Di khachu biwa nashi shubse thagarangi thep digi chokse la ma bigu yores.
So I think all of you have made a drawing.
Oh, the dusta du changme remote is inseres.
What we want you to do now is discuss in your group and decide on the most correct drawing to represent book 2.
Oh, the khari chair lana remote is a shas changme re chik chik chair remo. Di jela da kiran zu rupa nalo penju dewa di pa zu chodur chini the remote mangbuji mi shi na shi nga na nga chaiwa dige na ne ni ta remote ta chamshu jura khandi chag dos renshu de ni thebni ba gal shu khari gya me jura di ma sharo chis.
It may be a drawing that already exists on your whiteboard. It may be a combination of different drawings that exist on your whiteboard, or it may be a new drawing altogether.
The direlas ngoi ni khari remote thisha gyo jura dine ni ya damshana digres yana dine ni samju ni sta yakshu ro thon ana dini ga dombe ya remote chik chagra ditina digre yana samju sawal ni da yakshu remove mandra wa chana ge di ma remove saw the equation ai digres.
But just for a couple minutes, discuss in your group and decide on what is the best drawing that represents book 2.
The theb ni be gal shu khaju gya khari gya me chhen jura di remove yakshu ta renshu ro la ora khiran zo khari me di khiran zo nalu chodur chel kama khashish ma tigi is.
Okay?
다들 뭐가 니 받으라.
Two.
주라. 네. 너무 빠이나? 아니 뒤에 팀을 차고요 말을 가르쳐서는 사이트 티슈지도 저기 티슈 지 찍으라다 슈니. 플래시 총도나 지니 소다다라고도. 소라오.
Dusta du shuk shi tumbo dolas kush teshe gyaru chidas de shuk shi di khari khari chundu me
Sitera mane
dil tene chik chik teshe gyaru
kamu shimni gyabu de tambo gi shukchi
mare shuk chik chik teshe gyaru
네 이봐라. 네 이봐들라 슈. 내 담보도 슈지요. 내 담보도 많이 해주죠.
This is the force on book 2 by book 1.
난네 야슈지요라. 색깔에 떼보여라. 제법이 슈딩이 안에 니니 법으로 야슈지요.
So this is the force on book 2 by table.
This is the force on book 2 by the table. Yes?
난내 가르쳐서 사이여라. 사이 대주디 니니 법에 맞게 슈지요레스.
So let me bala.
니니 법으로 니니
This is the gravitational force exerted by the earth on book 2.
Wonderful.
아니 야지에도 노쇼라. 사이 대주디 맞게 슈지를 코너 슈 사이 대주 맞 슈들라 노쇼 야슈지요. 야파지.
There is an equal and opposite force of the gravitational force. So this force represents that.
This is a force on which object by which object?
So dina shuk ji kharan zo dishe gya swalas. Di ngobo khari ki kharil ge yores. Kya gen suri gya sa khore di.
sai tenshigi mar gyab gares dela docho dela chabagi yar
제법이 니니 법으로 야.
Table ge yores.
chabagi yar
Sila thebni ba gala. Force on book 2 by the table.
But this was the force on book 2 by the table.
ina di keran su ni shu de ge du gola tep ni be gola shu ge jo chok se ge jo de tu bas di roas
samlo na kare yo na shuni wa na dokchong de la shuni bu do samlo na te wa le
so we have in our mind that there are chayor lady there are twin forces the two forces which are equal and opposite in direction so we have that in our mind
Sure, but right now, for every force that I see, there has to be another force on a different object, which is its brother force from Newton 3.
keran su la ge di ta da res del shu khwan do asa tin zo la koran su cha yor la jora da ya chik chik yor da cha cha di gor la de ine yore te ine shu di gyasa digal ga ma res mo bo koran su gyasa loga cha de ra gyasa shimba cha de res yore shu di yue
So here I ask myself the question, with how many objects does book 2 interact?
ta tiwa ji yes tiwa di khar la na tep ni ba jora ta pa zu tin ji de che jua mo bo kha jing de de che shas 3 objects
The 3 objects.
mo bo sum roas
So I should have 3 forces.
mo bo sum nyam de la du gala shuk sum yor roas
So this is the gravitational force, you told me.
di keran zu sheba na shi tin shuk de roas
So who is exerting this force?
di shuk ga gen su res by earth
This is the force on book 2 by the table.
di tep ni be gal shuk ga jo di roas chok se gi shuk ga jo di
And this is the force on book 2 by book 1.
and di sumba di the tep ni be gal shuk ga jo di roas tep thang bo di
So then I cannot have this force.
di la du ta di shuk ti ten do shi ba di yo ma roas yong si ma roas
So now let's think about the strengths of these forces.
ta ngan zo ta du gala den zo shuk sum de gi ta thanda shuk che jung je ra li ta is
These 2 forces are down.
ta dus ta du gala shuk ding ni do kho do kha cho ma cho do ho la du do as shuk di
So how big should this force be?
di la du ani sumba ji do di shuk che kha gas ku res
For this not to move.
di gu jo ma ta la da gu jo tang mu da ne dang bi la gu jo ma dang du gala di shuk che kha gas ku res kan ju
te bai ki sura
so he's saying like this should be equal to some of these 2 forces
So now let's draw the free body diagram from there, the one that we have already drawn.
Once thanda remove che jo mo la remove che na se thanda din che yes
So there we have, what forces do we have here?
then shu khari res
sai tin ju yo re
this is book 1 right
Book 1.
di thep thambo de da sa ta di la shu khari res
de tam sai tin ju ji yo
a gravitational force
tene de ni bai ki
force on book 1 by book 2 Chidalas remove the candelier chok
bu ni bai ki yar yo
on the chair
So when I look at these forces and these forces, are there any Newton's third law force pairs?
remove chair rang zo ne dan de chi gere phage chi gera shu den to thi shara remuna di ma ko du gala di 니가 나타도 걸라 나가 좀 뉴턴 기 텐팅 수반을 숙된 좀 차차 니가 라줘라 니 차디 두에서 그나 두에 yes there is
사이와리.
yes there are two forces
Which one?
hari kari relas
그냥 디 동에는 다랑 말 되게 아니 보고 당부 숙지와 디 도스다들라 이제 가르치는 제발 숙지세요.
okay so he is saying like this is force on book 2 by book 1 so opposite to this is force by table on book 1
Newton's third law force pairs come between two objects.
and then Newton ki thanda tenting symbol la jora dinal shu de khadi tungu lawa na ngobuni khar thewa na tungu was
So the two objects are book 2 and book 1.
ta ngobuni ke je shwa na thanda thep nyu da thep thangbo ke je shi was
Do I see a force on book 1 by book 2?
thep thangbo gala thep nibo gala shu ge jo tungu do esa dina
디 당부 가는 디 왜요?
yes
Where is this one?
re sound shu de khod do sa remove na la ten la war khod do oh that's the one
That's the one. And where is the force on book 1 by book 2?
ta ngobuni bara la wara thanda di thep thangbo gala thep nibo la ra ta thep nibo gala thep thangbo shu ge jo jora ta thep nibo gala oh thep thangbo gala thep nibo ge shu ge jo di khod dos
디 당부 가는 디 니베
ge
숙지야.
jo khod dos di mares
No, this is the force between 1 and earth.
디 당부 가는 디
thep
니베
nibo shu
숙지야.
ge jo khod sa undi remuna
Yes. So they are opposite in direction
ta dini ta hoy na korani khacho ta hoy na dog de dos
and equal in magnitude, equal in strength,
ini shukse ta hoy na chipare dos naga
as Newton said.
ni ni sho na shi
So this is equal to this because of Newton's third law.
di khacho de da chippa chhalyo res di khajin rela na newton ki tenting symbol ta na de imbas chipa
This is equal to this because this object is not moving.
di da dini chippa chhadyo ros shugni di khaila na ngobu di gujo tam yo maras dini chippa ros
So then this force is equal to that force.
di la du gala dini chippa hindu di da di shugni di chippa chhalyo ros
And the force by the table then will be equal to the weight of this object plus this force, which is equal to the weight of the top book.
di la du chokze gala shu ge jo jora di khari da chippa chhalyo la na handa di shu ge jo chik che thaga na shi hep thangbo gi jise jora dini ga chhalyo ros
Okay?
se cha suesa
So, do I want the sum of these three forces to be equal to 0?
manju gugu yore las ti sumja dombe ani le gor cha gugu yore es
Okay? Because
kacho digi des la theodre so digi duel and gelal thera so the direction of force they have represented here is it correct
is the earth pulling or is it pushing?
se kolagi thengi yore yana bigu yore es kharchi yore es it pulls
Okay, so this is correct.
the digi yore was shu ma thengyo thida the digi yore es
Is the table pushing the book or is it?
chokse digi bigu yore thengi yore es ya bigu yore es it pushes
It pushes. So this is the correct.
tagda thidwa sa ya bigu
Is book 1 pushing or is it pulling?
Hep tango digi bigu yore es yana thengi yore es kharchi it pushes
It pushes. So then in what direction should I draw that force?
마 비교나 니 가져 hoạt động của rest đi đi
Mate. A dusra de kada. Dusra wajne.
Ti mati. Ni pa de rodam.
Very good. And I do want the sum of these three forces to be 0 because this is not moving.
당한조 가르라고라나 리 슈크숨도 숨저 견돔 따와나 레고르 보고 열라고 열라스 가일라나 오부데 소르네 데데라 요구 지금도 아스
So these two forces are pulling this way.
디나 따두가라 리 슈크니디 마 팅기 도아스
How big should I draw this force?
디 야종이 슈크지도 디 링동 카바스 치고 열레스 첼로 카바스 보고 열레스 카바스 코
다다 리와 좀.
This should be longer than this.
본이게 리토트 니 다음번에 콜라.
This should be some of these two forces.
Oh, ¿qué no pasó? So many good drawings around the room. Lots of really good thinking we see everywhere in the room. And I think most of you identified the forces acting on book 2. And then I think some of you were starting to think more about the strength of those different forces and how do they balance each other. And I saw at a few tables there were different drawings that were quite similar but had a slightly different representation of ideas.
So let's think about the forces that are exerted on book 2. We all have the experience of carrying a child in our lap. We all have the experience of carrying a box in our lap. And so we want to use those ideas in this situation because we are book 2 and the child is book 1 or the box is book 1. So we need to ask the question, this is book 2, how many objects are interacting directly with book 2?
Most of them are saying 3, he's saying 4.
장리기만 탱슈지요라 되긴 되어 진 점래니 거기 내 너무 되기 야 탱지도 도초네니 내니버 되기 드래블 야 탱지요 아니 내 너무 되기 거야 탱지 다 시간은 무시간 걸 수제도 너무 뜻사대 너무 뜻나 당고 걸 수제서 너무 들어라 슈가세요라 그래서 슈가세요 온디 거스나 슈기 거스나 실레요라 실레 온디 거강라 장리기 마 탱지도 컨장리 야 탱기 슈니요라 아니 데니버디 아니 마 탱지도 거용 장리 야 도촌 야 탱지
Let's not think about forces, let's think about how many objects.
ale ta thanda shuk de men da sa ngobo penchu de che ngobo khaju do sa thanda dina ngobo khaju okay three objects
Okay. So we have three objects. Book 1 is touching, the table is pushing, and the earth is pulling.
thanda dinal ngobo sum do as ti da de che di thep thangbo di cha sa thep thangbo di ma bigi yores chokjish do chokje di ya bigi yores ra thya na shi se kolegi ma thingi do di sum yores.
Do you agree? So let's start by the gravitational force that the earth is exerting on book 2.
The thangbo ngaju say kole tenshu jura say kolegi thep nibe gala tenshu kagyo jura digal thunan chenis.
So book 2, Bryce-La has drawn it as smaller than book 1.
The remote thing the Bryce chara Bryce ki thep nibe di thep thangbo le chunga tishas.
So what I will do is I will just draw these bigger so that we can see them.
The remote this cherutai khailan thong se chayra the remote cherutai is.
I did not change anything, I just drew this bigger.
Shimba kegyo ta me this cherutai is.
So that I can draw a gravitational force on book 2 by Earth that is smaller than this.
Thep nibe gal tenshu kagyo jura di shuk di this chunga tins phajula durwaina.
Do we all agree with that?
Dila changme ngmetun yuesa. Me sungi yue. Me sungi yue. Okay, he said no. Thanda di thep niwa la thep thangbogi di shuk gaju the rest lan chira. Di resangum industry. Oh yeah, he's saying it should be by the earth.
I'm sorry. I apologize.
Gela chidan chusha sama.
I'm sorry, yes.
Di chusha sa thep thangbo chido di chabla say kola chayo ros.
Only Earth exerts a gravitational force.
Tenshuk jura say kola tenshuk la di tingi su chagola na say kola rang chayo res.
Okay? So are we all in agreement then?
That's someone with you as the Yotansa.
Okay. Let's think about book 1. What direction does book 1 push on book 2? In what direction?
The tap tambola samlo tangwainas. Tap tambogi, tap nivel shuk jigeli ras. Di kajo hande res. Downwards.
So downwards, I do not know yet how big to draw it.
The mayor lara in a dita ring se jura chechung kagas streaming a habu marastanda. It should be same, they're saying. It should be slightly smaller than this one. Mixed responses. Some of them are saying, most of them are saying it should be equal. Some of them are saying shorter. Some are saying longer.
So right now we do not agree. So I'm not going to put the arrowhead on yet. Okay. So this force is going to be the force on book 2 by book 1.
다 대축 디 가르 충격을라나 탭 니베 갈라 개교 탭 당보기.
Okay? And what other object is interacting with book 2 that I have not taken into account yet?
다 단다 디날 따도 갈라 탭 니버 디 펜수 데와 치사 모보 가릴 하샤스.
And which way does is the direction of the force on book 2 by the table?
다 쪽제 다 체르 송라 펜수 데와 체디. 안 쪽제 기 슈지 개유라 탭 니버라. 디 가족 한데 구구레스. upwards.
So it is up, but once again I do not know how big to draw it.
디 강라 렐라라 양디 슈크세 치땡오라 링동디 디 가가 수메 가서 하고 링고 it should be bigger
Should be bigger than what?
che borlara karin che boires dabni khariga diga chi del da dabru dig dabni this call chicken da la kandi dabni korani gi dombe like dombe so it should be some of these two forces.
So one idea is that this force, the table, is exerting a force which is the sum of these two forces.
다 키란조 직삼로는 하리어로 아이나 단다 디슈지도아 디 아니 디니기 켠돔 슈데다 직과 차기 요레슬라니 요로스. Yes.
가세가 뭐가 쇼기만 된다. 아니 내 당고 김발에 뭐 비쇼 때다 사이코에 텐쇼 된다. 대니보다 강해야 일곱이야. 나는 쪽색이야 비쇼 된다나 마셔이나 아니 가시 대만 산니다.
디니 dombe di 직과 차나 마사그레스. 직과 마차와이나.
이거 참 마차나. 이거 마차와이나 올마 TV 쇼 된다. 올마 제다 사이코라게 텐쇼 되다. 아니 내 당고 막 비쇼 된다. 디니 dombe 쇼제 아니 쪽색이야 마자와이나 아니 코라마 산이지.
Okay, if these two forces is not equal to this one, so there are chances that the books two may fall.
So we have then a reason why we want this force to be equal to the sum of these two forces.
당아주 균센 도알라스. 디기 슈크디 디니기 켠돔다 직바 보르라 디 균센 주요로스.
The same way that yesterday when Brycela was on the skateboard and the two of us were pulling him in both directions with the same force and he did not move.
Kesa pechunten so as Bryce skill thanda kholo yudgala ya shangso phaju ni stamatis dijo nge thenra di thendu kesi shubzi chikba chikyan themba na choni gani and Bryce ku yotang mindos.
We want an object that is not moving to have the sum of all the forces be zero.
Dila du ngobo ji sonne yo chi bu yo go chi me oina dila shu gay erte ine shu kyondom tadu gala lebor chabi roaste.
So then this force will be equal to this one plus that one.
Dende sheduta di shuk jora di da dini gi kyondom di chikba chabi roas.
Now what I would like us to do is I want us to look at this free body diagram and this free body diagram side by side.
Ta thande khare chur la oina remove de chik ni do ni ga nyam do ta indas.
Are there any forces on the two free body diagrams that are Newton's third law force pairs?
Ta thanda Newton gi tentem sumbalani chai di thanda shuk den ju chal ni gi yor la jora di shuk cha di thoe de esti ni na. Okay.
단다 티노 안에 슈상마 좀 가서 떼요 말아. 이나야 뉴트리 tension somba de na lo an khashu ga na shu sang dongba shu zhu ye ba de tin ha ko de sang zo ki do shu shu ye ba de ta na ngo song ten yo ra ta tension somba ga na do shu ye ba de nga zo ha ko tu ris del ten
Tanda dingi nangla tentu sarwesa. By looking at these three forces, we can say that there are opposite forces, like twin forces for these three forces.
So, who would like to remind us what Newton's third law says?
The Kiran Suni Sushi insa Newton ki tentum sumba jua dinan kharishi res. Kiran Sunani Shingi Yue Tanglang. So the two forces are equal and opposite in direction.
Which forces?
For shuk khandi lagi sa. Any force.
Not any force. Newton's third law says that if object 1 exerts a force on object 2, then object 2 exerts a force on object 1 that is opposite in direction and equal in strength.
Shuk khari ina layo maris khailana Newton ki tentim suba na khari shir lawana ngobo thangbo da niba yoina ngobo thangbo gi phal shuk khaju gyaw na shi ngobo niba gi shuk thagaran gyagi res thyan shi khajo tawaina dokchor le ngobo ni gi para layo res.
So one force is exerted on object 1 and the other force is exerted on object 2.
Shuk chik di khol gyar lana ngobo thangbo di ga gyay res shuk shen di khol gyar lana ngobo niba dil gyay res.
So I will never find Newton's third law force pairs on the same diagram.
Dila dugala ta rimu chikran chikla tawaina tanda cha ningi jua niga rimu chikna la thwaya yo mares.
Because on the same diagram are forces that are exerted on one object.
Khaisena tanda nganzu rimu chik tu shara losu dinal khari tu lawana ngobo chik gala shu khaju gya me jura khari gya me di tu shares.
So I'm looking at both free body diagrams and I'm asking, is there a force on one diagram that has a third law pair on the other diagram?
Ta thanda chua khar li lana rimu niga tawana rimu thangbo da niba do rimu thangbo dil ta du gala shuk jura dige ni cha ya jura ta cha suela digi ya di shemba dinala thongai dues nig dues lan di ni stiwali niga tana chigran jil tana nig mara niga tawana dues. Yes, there are.
What force?
So the force on book 2 by book 1.
The force on book 2 by book 1, this force.
The ruasa chigdi and digi ya di khandire. It's the force on book 1 by book 2.
And the force on book 1 by book 2.
Dida dingi cha chagi ruas.
So how big should I draw this force?
Ta de shuk jidwa ta shuk se la du ring se to radinal ringdung hawas thigu yures. It should be same length as that one.
So I should draw it this big.
Ta ringdung digas thigu yures ring se de.
Because it is the third law force pair to this force.
Khaizana tentim sumbal tawaina cha yures digi cha di yures an chibo chigyang bu yures de ringdung de.
Okay?
This is chaswas.
We have a disagreement.
Could ma tenjora ma chibula tenja on the sag tensik de don the tombu stirjaba jora diniga chigba machoba in the tribur paya jora de don chig diniga domi domtubte tribur ya chab shig de don chigson chagoris yoson pagi the tombu nibala cha neyagi shig jora sala neyagi shig de niga chigba chagoris.
Kandis thep thangbogi
remote could remote the chigba chagoris no than mo tenson. Oh, the tontons jagoris. Sag tensik de chigba. Oh, did the chigba. Oh, did the chigba.
Saying like this length should be of the same equal length as this one.
Why?
Harchinis.
The garrison Jabber yes jagba shik de don pugin nigi nichagi sir name bag shik jora. The chumdum chigba chagoris.
Because the force exerted by the table should be equal to some of these two forces.
The force exerted by the table should be equal to the sum of these two forces. I agree.
메투 유에서 쪽지기야 슈 가지고 나시 딩이 슈 주라 딩이 견돔 디 레스 메투 유에서 어디
But why should this force be equal to this one?
아니 어디데 다 딩이 견돔 디 찍고 고르래죠 디 메투 유에서 네 케랑기 딩이 찍고 고르래 도서 디 가르신 찍고 고르레스
식이 띠니기 싫어서 띠니기 싫은 거예요 식도 찍었지 움직이기 파트너라 움직이기는 니식 뭐부터서 니 영역에서 세요만 라바 이기 되잖아 라바 니 찍다 같이 고르지
단다 딩이 디다 딩이 찍고 고르래 메투 유에서라 다 케랑기 디 링동 찍고 고르스도 디 가르신
농구 띠니기 식찍 맞도 배워 말이지 농구 띠니가 식찍 넣으시더라
뭐 딩이 차사다 탭 당보다 So he's saying the force exerted by book 1 and the earth is equal, is same. So he's saying like the shubni yo mare sungora da chukchik res. So he's saying there are no separate forces by book 1 or earth. It is the same. There's only one force.
Okay, so let's actually give some numbers. Okay? So, how will I find how big this is? What can I do to find out how big this is?
답변이다 안경가 지잡 쳤거다 사기 텐식대 깔망가 지잡 아니 단다 동북만 내가 nen시 줘라 띠용 깔망가 잡네 어 nen시 식대 식생가 식식기 따디
So we can represent these forces by stars. The force exerted by the earth by 5 stars like that.
Okay, but how would I measure this? I would actually hang the book from here. Do you agree? So suppose I did that and I found that this force is 10 newtons. How big should this force be? 10
Newton.
How will I find how much the gravitational force on book 2 by Earth is?
I would
hang the book 2, on the scale. And because book 1 is bigger than book 2, I expect this to be less than 10 newtons. Let's say that it is 6 newtons. Okay? All right. So if book 2 pushes on book 1 with 10 newtons, with how many newtons is book 1 pushing down on book 2?
Same, with the same force.
So this will be also 10 newtons. This would be 10 newtons because it is equal to this 10 newtons. Because these two forces are Newton's third law force pair.
Di Newton ki tentim sumba ki shuk cha jibyo dingi cha de res.
This is 10 newtons because this is 10 newtons.
Di Newton chu res. Khai sana di wo di Newton chu indu di Newton chu cha de res.
And this is 10 newtons because this is 10 newtons because this is not moving.
Di Newton chu re khai lana wo di Newton chu res. Di khachin lagor lana di ngobo di gudyo tangyo yo ma res.
The fact that this is 10 newtons is because of different reasoning than this is 10 newtons.
Di Newton chu re la jora. Di ki gyunsen ma pa ba na di Newton chu re la di gyunsen lo wa cha bi yo res.
This is 10 and this is 10 because of Newton's third law.
Di dan di ni chu chu re la jora. Chi khari la lo na Newton ki tentim sumba yo ra. Di ta ni di ni chi pa cha de res.
This is 10 because this is 10 because we said that an object at rest must have balance force.
Di chu insan di chu re la jora Newton. Di kharchin re la gor la na ngo bu chik so ne yo ga su yo bu chi me yo ga su thanda pha chu ni ga shub ni ga ya thonyam chani an le gor chagir la jora di gi shi song sha ne shi yo res.
Okay, so this is 10 newtons. The upper book is pushing on the lower book with 10 newtons.
Di Newton chu di khari re la na thep gong ma jora di gi wong ma dil ma ne gi yo res.
And the earth is pulling with 6 newtons.
Ani se khole gi the jora di shub di Newton thuk res.
How many newtons is this one?
Tha di gang la chik do shub ji. Di ani Newton khajur res. 16.
So it should be 16.
Di chu tu gu yo ras.
This is the force on book 2 by the table and it is 16 newtons.
Ta di shuk ji do di thep ni be gang la chok se di ya yo shuk di cha yo res. An di shuk se khajur la na Newton chu tu cha yo res.
So the table is supporting 16 newtons.
Ta chok se di khagas thanda ramde ya kya share la na 16 Newton chu tu ya di shi kya share yo cha de res.
And give me just 30 seconds and we're going to go to tea break.
Kama sumju chibu tero chis di jalan seje vasin la phecho res.
So the table is
Parcha
supporting
sumju gonda kama sumju.
the table is supporting 16 newtons.
Chok se di ta thanda khagas kya de la na Newton chu tu kya de res.
But the table is not exerting any forces on book 1.
Ina ya chok se di gi thanda thep thangbo jora di la shuk chi kya gi yo ma res.
Book 1 is not exerting any forces on the table.
Thep thangbo di gi chok se di la shuk chi kya gi yo ma res.
So we will continue after a tea break. Thank you.
Tas soje percent jel mi thu ni dwe is di.